Hi Year 11, today we're going to be going through some quick hints and tips for how to effectively revise GCSE English language. So what we hear most often is people saying, oh, I don't know how to revise language, but hopefully this will give you some really specific ideas about what to do. So tip number one, know the exam layouts. There's two language papers, they're fairly similar, so it's really important that you know the similarities and the differences. So paper one is your creative reading and writing. It's 1 hour 45 minutes. You get one fiction text. We'd recommend 15 minutes to read and annotate that. You've got 4 questions in section A, and then there's a choice of 2 questions in section B, with you answering one that will be either descriptive or narrative. For paper 2, which is your last GCSE exam paper for English, it's all about writers' viewpoints and perspectives. It's also 1 hour 45 minutes. This time you get 2 non-fiction texts. One will be more modern, so it could be 20th or 21st century, and one will be from the 19th century, so the same era as A Christmas Carol. And again, you've got around 15 minutes to read and annotate both of those. There are 4 questions again in section A, and there is only 1 question in section B for this one, and you'll be asked to write a letter, an article, a speech, an essay, or a leaflet. So on tip 1 still, knowing the exam layout, there's just a quick run through here of each of the questions and what you need to do for them. So paper 1 lists 4 things for question 1, then it's a how does a writer use language question. That should be answered using our what, how, why paragraph structure. Question 3 is how has a writer structured the text to interest you as a reader, so looking for those specific structural moments, talking about like macro, the overview, talking about micro moments, zooming in on characters, use of dialogue. There's no language analysis for that question. Question 4 is your evaluation. You'll get given a statement with 2 parts to it, and you'll have to think to what extent do you agree. So generally we'd encourage you to agree with one and challenge the other part of it, but it is entirely up to you and what the question is on the day, on what your opinion is on it. And that's again a what, how, why structure, looking at those methods. That could be structural methods, that could be language methods, but that's how you're going to get the majority of your marks. And then for question 5, as we've said, a choice of 2 creative writing prompts. There will or there should be an image. Every year so far we have had an image, but we never know what AQA will do next. So there should be an image, but if there isn't, it will still be exactly the same activity of using the prompt to then write a short, focused piece of creative writing. For paper 2, question 1 is 4 multiple choice statements. It's really important that you shade those circles because otherwise it's a really easy way to lose marks. Question 2 is writing a summary, comparing the 2 texts together. So that wants to be a what can you see in terms of the question. If the question is asking you about surfboards or trains or places where the medical professionals work, you'll say what is it telling you about that? And then what is the evidence, using quotations? What can you infer from that? So no language analysis, just what can you infer? And then comparing it to the second text. And always remember on that, a good tip is one is a more modern perspective, one is an older perspective. So what has changed in the attitudes or that particular focus between that kind of time period? Question 3 is exactly the same as question 2 on paper 1. How does a writer use language? Really specific focus. It will be what, how, why structure again. Aim to get those methods in and talk about why they're used, what the impact of them is. And then question 4 is comparing the writer's different, or it might be similar perspectives, thoughts, feelings. It's exactly the same thing on a particular topic. So again, that could be like animal welfare, it could be competitive sports, it could be cycling, it could be education, it could be homework, but it's the same what, how, why structure, and you compare as you go. And then finally, question 5 is you'll be given a statement again, and you'll have to write a non-fiction text, as we've already mentioned, for a specific audience, giving your opinion. So just make sure that you know that exam layout and you know exactly what's going to be on there. You don't know what the texts are, but you know what the questions are and what you need to do for each one. Tip 2, this is more about being savvy with the time that you've got because it is limited. Section off the text as you go. So as soon as you get into that exam and you're allowed to open your papers, open up your insert, open up your question paper, read the question and section off the text because you're saving yourself some time. Often when we go through it in lessons, we look for kind of everything because we're practicing all of our skills. You don't have time to do that in your exam. You just need to work smart and use the timings that you've got. The second bullet point here is just additional information. I always think that extra highlighters are great for colour coding the information. So you could have one like colour for question 1, one for question 2, and it just makes it visually really easy. But feel free to ignore me on that one. So just an example of what I mean here, that's a paper 1, which I've kind of sectioned off. You can see where I've done question 1 and the focus, question 2 and the focus. Question 3 is obviously the whole thing. So I've just done a very brief kind of how is it structured, what is the focus as we go through. And in question 4, I've got the 2 parts of the statement. And if I had annotated that, then you might have seen those 4 different colours that I'd be using. Paper 2 is here. I've only put up one part of the text because I think you get the idea, but the same thing going through, sectioning off. And then for me personally, I always think that a grid is quite a good way to compare the 2 texts together. So I'd have a grid comparing the attitudes in source A and the attitudes in source B. And it just means that I've already kind of planned as I'm reading through, all the information is there for me and I can utilise that time. Tip 3, you will hear different things about this, but I would definitely tell you to learn some methods. We've been using subject terminology for English over the past 5 years, ever since year 7. So thinking about things like juxtapositions, thinking about things like tone, thinking about adjectives or verbs or imagery or semantic fields or metaphors. Get learning some of these terms, get used to looking for them in text. You'll use them in literature as well as for language. Most importantly, it's not about spotting the terminology, it's about explaining why that method is used. If a writer is using humour and they're talking about quite a serious topic, why might they decide to use humour there? What impact does that have? If a writer uses exaggeration, so a couple of years ago we had a text about 2 trains. One of them was a train crash and they said that their suitcase fell down breaking their knees, and then a sentence later it said that they got up and walked out of the carriage. So clearly that's exaggeration. You would not be getting up and walking out if your knees were actually broken. So why has that exaggeration, why is that hyperbole being used? What is the impact and effect of that? If you can talk about that, that is what's going to move you from possibly like a lower pass grade to then a much kind of higher grade. And finally, practice, practice, practice. That really is the most important and most effective way of getting better at English language. So there are some links here. There's physics and maths where all of the exam papers for language are in one place, and there's also Revision World. You've got the papers for paper 1 and paper 2. You've got the inserts. You've also got the mark scheme, so you can self-mark if you wish to. You can practice whole papers. You can just practice a question at a time. Anything is going to be better than just not practicing and waiting until those exams come up, and that really is one of the best ways that you can improve. Another way that you can improve your English language skills is reading. Spend, amongst all of the revision that you're doing for all your subjects, spending 10 to 15 minutes reading per day will really help to increase your reading speed and your comprehension, so that you can utilise that limited time in the exam situation as well. If you are doing any writing practice, obviously, as I've said, self-mark it, but please also get it to your teachers and we're more than happy to give you feedback. Any questions, if you're unsure how to move forward with the English language revision, please come and talk to your teachers, and it will all be worth it, guys. Go well, you've got this.